was a tall, slim man with black hair. The Country Party was a junior member of the coalition. Instead of bowing meekly to Bob Menzies, he fought strongly for tariff protection. Bob Menzies and John had great respect for each other, but Bob chided him in a friendly way by commenting on his dark demeanour when he was protecting his beloved Country Party, and called him Le Noir, or Black Jack. As leader of the Country Party and as Deputy Prime Minister, he was interim Prime Minister when Harold Holt was lost at sea. John used tariff protection to keep manufacturing and agriculture strong. At that time, we manufactured and exported farm machinery. Farmers were among the richest people in Australia and had basically no debt. Farm debt has climbed to 70 billion and suicides are now high. John McEwen and John Gorton established the Australian Industry Development Corporation, which instigated value-adding industries. It was calculated that the value difference in exporting bauxite versus processed aluminium in 1970 dollars was 1. Exporting 1 million tonnes of bauxite, the raw material, earned $5 million. Processed one step into alumina earned 27 million. Processed again into aluminium earned 125 million. And processed finally into aluminium products earned $600 million. Universal free trade policies of both major parties have basically killed this initiative. John was such a strong advocate of these policies that they were known as McEwenism. John McEwen is the inspiration for rebuilding the Country Party to save Australia. Cut. Had been growing very strongly for decades and thought that they would grow strongly forever. In 1970, and this is the time when John McEwen was in power, it was agreed by most people, but not John, that we should reduce tariffs to bring developing countries up to the point where they could be producing 23% of the world's production. The unforeseen consequence of this is that instead of going up and up forever, developed countries have now started to droop, while developing countries are going up at a very strong rate. In 1975, the Lima Declaration was resolved, and it was stating that there should be a 23-year experiment to allow the developing countries to build up to that 23% production target. But when the year 2000 came and went, no one bothered to look at it, and so as a result, we're now continuing on a downward path. Finish. We feel that there were 4 political decisions which really put us into the bad position we are in at present. The first political decision was the one made in 1970 when it was decided that we would start reducing tariffs. Now, reducing tariffs is wonderful if you're exporting iron ore. It's very good if you're exporting cattle. It's good for a few other things, perhaps like cherries, but for everything else it's killing us. So when we come closer to what we're interested in, our farmers, we have drawn this thing from 1970 showing tariff reduction and the relationship of farm debt, which is going up exponentially. It's going up exponentially due to interest on interest. And so this is what we know that we cannot reverse this, but what we can do is we can have selective tariff protection. And so we want to be able to have discussions with people about how we can save Australia, not about just a universal free trade, which is the main policy of the 2 major parties. Cut.
You're on.
Okay. What we want to do is to show that whereas we think that Australia is the envy of the developed world in general is going down. This is the way our politicians have set it up for us to be. The rest of the world is climbing up at a huge rate, which is at least double and more than that of the way we are going. And so with us, we're coming up this way, but even though Tony Abbott is saying that we are now going to come back up again, the trend is coming this way, and we need him to show us exactly how we're going to get there, not from generalities of saying that we're going to have lots of production and we're going to show the world how it can be done. We want to get firm information, because we're 2.4% now, but already the last number of months we've had negative balance of payments. If we continue the balance of payments, then it means that we will also follow down into first flattening out completely and then going into negative. And then that's all I need to do at this stage, is just see how that goes. So we can take that off now.
Oh,
In the previous film clip, it showed the time when, this is about a year ago now, this is back in early 2014, we were told that Australia was the envy of the developed world. And it showed that even though the developing world was going up, the developed world was coming down, but we were the top one there at 2.4%. Now, we were at 2.4% at that time because we had the mining boom, and that mining boom held us up for this time. Now that the mining boom's gone and we're being told we're going to transition into something else, but they can't say what it is. Well, it looks as though it's nothing, because we now are coming down in here, and this will be heading us down into the same situation as Greece or Spain or whoever. So we desperately need to be talking to people and reviewing each one of these graphs as quickly as possible. Cut. This one is a more difficult one to understand, so it's good that it's going to be up there for quite a long time. Jean's sister Jill sent me a DVD by the late Lance Endersby, and as soon as I saw this part of the diagram, then I could understand it straight away, but I found that perhaps other people find a bit more difficulty. What we're showing is that these are two developing countries, China and Indonesia. And the developing country has quite a lot of manufacturing, a lot of agriculture, and because these are production, then they can easily afford the limited amount of services that they provide for their citizens. They then have enough money left over to be able to invest all over the world, including Australia. Now, in 1996, when Lance produced this, it showed that Australia and the United States had very small amount of manufacturing and even much smaller amount of agriculture. And when I saw it, I could not believe that it was as low as that. By the time I got it in 2011 and I checked it out, and these were not right anymore because we had dropped further in both manufacturing and agriculture. And what we learned from, one of the many things we learned from Lance was that it appears that you need about 30% of production to be able to service 70% of the services which are part of the nanny state. There are some sort of services which you can make money on, but most of them it's costing us. And we have had great difficulty in getting any accountant, any economist anywhere to be able to check out that 30-70 ratio. Meanwhile, the manufacturing and agriculture has sunk even further, and we are strongly suggesting that that is why we are now headed for maybe debt forever. So this is something that we certainly want to be able to talk to people in general, But in particular, we would like to talk to any economist anywhere about this 30-70 ratio, because there's a few people who have started to talk about it, but they talk about very sort of airy-fairy things, how the whole economic structure has changed, and so we can survive on what we're doing. We have doubts about that. Cut. This one is complicated. This one's even more complicated. The two of them together make it complicated enough that we're hoping that this might cause you to have meetings with us so we can discuss each one in time. But they relate to each other, because if you're a developing country, it's quite easy for you to balance your budget so that instead of having a debt that's going up, you've got it so that it's a matter of how much have you got to spend on bullet trains or ports or whatever. Because we have now got not only into this situation but down into this one, whereas we, until fairly recently, had a balanced budget, we then found that when the new government came in, there was an undiscovered debt that probably started about there. But since then, it's going up even more. And I felt that when we look at what we should be getting as revenue, and we're very short on revenue compared to what we are spending, then because what we should have as revenue is not high enough, then it means that it equates to debt increasing. If we can get closer to the proper revenue target, then the slope of the debt will come down. But even so, it's still going up. Now, back in May of 2014, I predicted that there was no hope at all of balancing the budget by 2016. But Tony Abbott and Joe Hockey and everyone felt, including Ian McFarlane, felt that we should. On a different scale, if we look at Joe's picture of debt, how it was getting closer to break even at budget time, he's now admitting that instead of having it in here, it's 20 years out into the future. So that the main thing was that it was easy for our group to be able to see that we were heading into trouble, but our current government just doesn't seem to understand. So that we really do want to have as much discussion on everything we've shown before, but particularly those and that. Cut.